dominated by the Chancellor's resignation, but not the Star. Apart from that...
They've taken the attitude and the feelings of many in Westminster.
OK, I like what you're saying. OK, let's pick up The Guardian, first of all. That's your first choice for their coverage. They are describing it this way: brutal Johnson tightens grip as Javid forced out.
Absolutely, and they've actually chosen the picture very cleverly here. You've got this picture of... He looks a little bit devastated in this photograph. A lot of the coverage in the papers differs according to who exactly the finger is being pointed at, but ultimately this is all a question about who has the power in Downing Street, number 10, whether or not it's Boris Johnson behind all of this or Dominic Cummings, his unelected advisor, is another matter, but Javid was not expecting to lose his job today. He was told that he had to share special advisors with number 10.
Which involved getting rid of his own
getting rid of his own... It's all about, is he going to have independence, essentially? How much is he going to be influenced by number 10? So he was having his influence and independence taken away, essentially, by this diktat that he had to share advisors with number 10. And he said in quite a scathing press conference afterwards that no self-respecting minister would accept this. Well, Rishi Sunak has accepted it. This picture, I think, sums it all up very well. He looks very shocked. I don't think many people were expecting it. It seems like you could look at this two ways. In one respect, it could have been an attempt to get number 11 under the control of number 10, or it could be a very clever wheeze to get Sajid Javid out. Perhaps that was the plan all along.
Well, yes, and a shocking moment, as Jenny was saying there. What did you make of it in the newsroom at the Financial Times when you heard this? Was it a surprise to you?
Well, I was actually in our little parliamentary office where we were watching the reshuffle. I'd been there since 8 a.m. and was waiting to hear what was going to happen. And of course, in reshuffles, the sackings begin first, and that happens behind closed doors in Boris Johnson's parliamentary office where there aren't cameras and photographers. And we saw that with Geoffrey Cox, Andrea Leadsom, Theresa Villiers, all people who'd left government was done. And then, of course, they then went back off to Downing Street for the walk up the street with people who are going to keep their jobs, or the ones who are getting promoted. And Sajid Javid went in, and we thought it would be a yes, shake your hand, stay in the job, because that was what was expected. And before this, Downing Street was saying this is going to be a moderate reshuffle, and of course this was anything but. And rumours started to emerge after about an hour because Sajid Javid went in, and eventually after 75 minutes, folks and civil servants were kind of saying, well, hang on a minute, this is definitely not going to plan. This should have all been sorted by now. And then suddenly, it just all absolutely exploded in this absolutely shocking development that this question about was it planned, was it expected? No. I think...
You don't think so? So it wasn't about getting rid of Sajid Javid, it was genuinely about getting rid of his aides and trying to exercise more control? Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that number 10 did want to get control. That's what this was about, because there's been a war of words between number 10 and number 11, with briefings going backwards and forwards, attacking each other over High Speed 2, over the budget, over the role of Carrie Symonds, the Prime Minister's partner, in a paper a couple of days ago that some people have cited as being quite crucial to all this. So I think really it came to a head, and Boris Johnson said to Sajid Javid, look, I like you, I want you to stay on, but you need to collar your advisors. And I think Mr. Javid thought this might be coming. There could be a negotiation about who stays, who goes. But in fact, it was an ultimatum. And Sajid Javid decided that if he stayed on, he really would be the so-called Chino, which is an expression Boris Johnson allies have used to describe him, the Chancellor in name only. And so he quit, and there he is. You can see he's going back home with his backpack, and he had some Five Guys burgers delivered to his home later on. And
Other burgers are available.
They're not available, but it's a pretty brutal business, from going the ministerial car and having this huge department and preparing for a budget in 3 weeks to sitting eating a burger.
Well, yeah, it's an extraordinary moment there. I'm going to move I'm going to let you talk, obviously, but I'm going to move the papers on just to the Daily Express next, just so we can see some other front pages. Boris the Iron Man tightens his grip, and this plays into that idea that this is about number 10 having more control. And some people might say, what's the problem with having a strong leader who knows what he wants and for everyone on his team to be feeling the same way? Others say there's traditionally a tension between number 10 and
Checks
number
and
11,
balances.
and it's important to have that tension. I don't
It
know
is. You've got a Prime Minister who has made a lot of promises, and particularly to people in the north of England who have voted Conservative for the first time, who needs to be kept in check by the art of what is actually possible in terms of the finances. There needs to be some distance between number 10 and number 11 so that they're not, the country doesn't go bankrupt. And in many respects, Rishi Sunak is somebody who is quite biddable. To some people, it might seem like he's come out of nowhere. He was a junior minister until quite recently. But for a long time, he's been tipped as somebody who the Conservative Party see great things in, and he's somebody who's always been very much a supporter of Boris Johnson, and he is prepared to accept these conditions of the job. So this idea that, all of this was unplanned, that might be so, but this has worked out quite well for number 10 if what number 10 wants is to strengthen their grip on power.
Well, yes, which is the phrase used on the front page of your paper, Sebastian. They call it a power grab there in the headline, don't they? And it's an article that I know that you've co-written here. And to what extent is this about a power grab? Is that what this is all about? And are we seeing examples of that elsewhere in this reshuffle?
Absolutely, I think that is what it's about, because the fact is Boris Johnson won that big majority in December's election off his own back. There's no one else really involved in that election campaign, and he feels he has an almost presidential-style mandate to deliver on that election result.
It was also Dominic Cummings. I mean, that's
Sure, no, and I think, obviously we should be careful because Boris Johnson is the Prime Minister. He does make these decisions, and when you look at some policy decisions, be it Huawei's involvement in the 5G network or High-Speed 2, he is happy to go against Dominic Cummings and do what he thinks is best. But I think just on the Treasury point, I would say that the Treasury has always been this incredibly powerful department, and the relationship between number 10 and number 11 has been a source of tension for many, many decades. And clearly Boris Johnson feels he's got this moment where he's got a huge amount of political capital. Now is the time to spend it. And I think what he was trying to do is, I think the Telegraph calls it bringing the Treasury to heel here. And there's a whole lot of number 10 sources quoted in tomorrow's paper saying, look, we're going to be totally united now on delivering. And I think that is true, that if you look at the two men on the left are going to be the ones who are going to have to deliver on this agenda. And as Jenny was saying, there's a lot that needs to be done if the Tories are going to hold on to those voters who trusted them for the first time. The challenge for Mr. Sunak is to prove that he is not the Chino, the Chancellor in name only, that he is his own man.
And he does have, he has a lot of background in banking.
Totally,
and
yeah.
He's not no fool, is he?
He has 3 weeks until the budget as well. That's the other thing. It's very, very
We think
strange.
it might. We actually still don't know when it might happen.
It hasn't been confirmed, has it? It was the 12th of March, certainly.
But it has to take place quite soon.
That's right, before April.
And we can see Dominic Cummings, their pictures as one of the 4 people on the front page there. The Mirror goes to town on him, don't they?
Yes.
On their front page, as I don't know if we can see the front page of the Mirror. There he is. Bloodbath, they call it, and they have Dominic Cummings there as the puppet master.
Yeah, I mean, he fits quite well into this cartoon baddie role that people want to put him in with. He says some strange things sometimes. He has a weird look in his eyes sometimes, and I think people like this idea of that it's an idea that people can latch onto, this idea of unelected people behind the scenes controlling things. Whether or not that is the truth is another matter, but nonetheless, I'm sure he was very instrumental in a lot of what happened today, because he's very involved in Whitehall appointments. I think Sajid Javid and him have fallen out in the past over this and other matters. So I do think he was very instrumental in what happened today.
And very briefly, let's just take a look. I think there's a double-page spread that you were interested in, which touches on some of the other appointments as well. You've got some of the other people who have gone there in that yellow box on the right-hand side, for example.
Yes, indeed, because aside from the Sajid Javid thing, there are actually some quite big changes to the rest of Boris Johnson's cabinet. So you can see, one of the more surprising things was Julian Smith, the Northern Ireland Secretary, who was widely praised by all parties in the province for getting Stormont up and running and bringing back the devolved government. He was booted out. Geoffrey Cox, who was a very loyal supporter of Boris Johnson, he lost his job, as did the Business Secretary, Andrea Leadsom, and the Environment Secretary, Theresa Villiers, as well. But as well as Mr. Sunak, the other key people you can see a lot more and hear a lot more of in the coming months is Alok Sharma, the new business secretary, who's also taking the head of the COP26. That's the big international climate summit happening in Glasgow. That's been a bit of an embarrassment for the government as it's not really gone to plan, so he's in charge of that. But the key message throughout everything is loyalty. This number 10 has a very long memory, and anybody who didn't support Boris Johnson from the off has not done so well, where those who have toed the line, been a bit more low-key, but have always been loyal to Boris, those are the ones who are on the up.
Okay, we're going to take a break now. Coming up after the break, what happened when a coronavirus patient took an Uber to hospital? More on that in just a moment. Pretty much squeezed off the front pages because of the cabinet reshuffle. Excuse me. However, it does make the front of the Daily Telegraph, even though it's rather small down there at the bottom.
It's really interesting because this is probably the first day that the story hasn't really been everywhere, but it is this remarkable detail that there was a case diagnosed in London, and the woman in question took an Uber to A&E, and two of the medical staff who saw her at St Thomas's Hospital have been sent into isolation. Don't want that, really. And the advice is all just to stay at home if you think you've got it. This woman was Chinese. Maybe she didn't hear the advice. She's come over from China. But yeah.
I mean, the one thing about it, as you say, she took an Uber. I guess there's a good digital record of driver and passengers because of the system that they use, which you'd hope would make it easier to trace people that might have been in that particular car, for example.
You would do, but then on the other side of it, you know, the government has been so desperate to control every element of the people and transportation around the coronavirus because it's so contagious, and we've seen, you know, from China about how rapidly this thing can spread. And the idea that they should hop into an Uber and get to a hospital, I imagine, is terrifying the Department for Health, because they'll just be thinking, imagine lots of other people see this and do that kind of thing. But the fact is, you know, Matt Hancock, the health secretary, said this thing is going to get worse before it gets better because they can only do so much to control it. But this kind of behaviour probably doesn't help. You know, the first people are coming out of quarantine on the world at the moment from that, which shows they're starting to go somewhere else.
And I think the hope is at the moment is to slow down the spread of it. I think there is a feeling that you can't
delay it
until the summer, because then people will have more resilience, you know, given the pattern of this spread.
And just a quick word on coronavirus, because it's literally just come in via the Reuters news agency, saying that the local health commission in China's Hubei province, which is of course the epicenter of the outbreak, they are reporting 116 new deaths on February the 13th today. So that's the latest figures coming in from the epicenter. Let's just try and squeeze in, if we can, two more stories very briefly. They're both on the same double page spread, and the Times. There's the first one of them. Bloomberg takes first poll league and swipe at Trump. And yes, there's kind of verbal fisticuffs going on already, isn't there?
I know, well, it's always good to look to America to take politics to a higher ground here. That Donald Trump obviously loves his Twitter account and used it today to lay into Michael Bloomberg, who's the former mayor of New York, billionaire businessman, and described him as a 5'4" mass of dead energy. Now, I was just saying before we went on air, you know, Donald Trump has an amazing way with words sometimes, that phrase, the kind of thing that will stick, and he's probably delighted with himself he managed to do that. But then Mike Bloomberg then powered back in on him as well and described him as a clown. So it's kind of amazing, this election. We're well into the Democratic primaries. People talking about, you know, the policies of Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. And here we've got two New York billionaires sparing silly barbs at each other.
Never a dull moment in this race. Okay, and we've got about 20 seconds and a story here.
I think that's all this story needs.
Go on,
An Iranian minister tweeted a picture of a spacesuit promoting, and the national flag of Iran, promoting their new space program, but it turns out that the spacesuit was a costume from Amazon for children, and he got rumbled. But he said, oh no, this is just an aspiration, an idea of what the suits are going to look like.
And did apologise as well,
sending Iranian children into
You're going to go to space, you've got to start somewhere.
Okay,
Amazon.
we are out of time. Thanks both very much indeed, as usual.